Captain Do-hyun Park stood in the bustling spaceport, staring at his new command with mixed feelings. The UES Firefly wasn't what he had expected. While other captains received modern battleships with gleaming hulls and powerful weapons, he got an old scout ship that looked like it belonged in a museum. "Well, she's different," said Lieutenant Hae-Nul Kim, his first officer, trying to sound positive. The attempt at diplomacy made Do-hyun smile despite himself. The Firefly was small compared to modern warships. Its hull showed signs of countless repairs, and its sensor arrays looked outdated. Do-hyun had graduated at the top of his class at the Space Academy, but instead of getting a new ship, he got this relic from the past. "Different is one way to put it," Do-hyun replied, running his hand along the ship's worn hull. The metal felt warm under his touch, almost alive. "Let's meet our crew." Inside, the ship's corridors were narrow but clean. The crew had clearly worked hard to keep the old girl in good shape. As they walked toward the bridge, Do-hyun noticed something interesting. While the ship was old, everything worked perfectly. There were no loose panels, no flickering lights, no strange noises that often plagued older vessels. Science Officer Yi-jin Choi met them at the bridge entrance. She was young, like most of the crew, with bright eyes that showed sharp intelligence. "Captain, welcome aboard. I've prepared a full report on our ship's capabilities." "Thank you, Officer Choi. What's your honest opinion of our vessel?" Yi-jin's eyes lit up. "The Firefly is fascinating, sir. Modern ships filter out so much data to be efficient, but our older sensors pick up everything. Sometimes too much. We get readings that newer ships ignore completely." Engineer Tawan Lee joined them, wiping his hands on a cloth. His uniform showed signs of recent work in the engine room. "Captain, you won't believe how well built this ship is. The warp drive is old, but it's incredibly reliable. Modern ships sacrifice durability for power. The Firefly was built to last." Do-hyun nodded, starting to see his command in a new light. Yes, the ship was old, but it had character. And more importantly, it had a crew who believed in it. Their conversation was interrupted by an emergency alert. Red lights flashed throughout the ship as Hae-Nul rushed to the communications console. "Captain, we're receiving a priority message from Fleet Command. The Nexian Empire has launched a major offensive. 3 colony worlds have gone dark." The mood on the bridge changed instantly. Everyone knew about the Nexians, an alien empire that had appeared 6 months ago, with technology far beyond humanity's understanding. Their ships could appear anywhere, ignore the strongest defenses, and disappear before anyone could react. So far, nothing in the human fleet could even touch them. "All hands to stations," Do-hyun ordered, settling into the captain's chair. It adjusted to his shape, the old mechanisms still working perfectly. "Officer Choi, start scanning. Engineer Lee, I want the engines ready for anything. Lieutenant Kim, plot us a course to the nearest colony world." The crew moved with practiced efficiency. Despite the ship's age, everything responded quickly to their commands. The main screen showed their position relative to the 3 lost colonies, forming a triangle in space. "Sir," Yi-jin called out, frowning at her readings. "There's something strange in the sensor data. Our old arrays are picking up distortions around the colony worlds. Modern sensors would filter these as background noise. But what, Officer Choi?" "The pattern, sir. It's not random. These distortions appear exactly 23 minutes before each colony goes dark. It's like ripples in space itself." Do-hyun leaned forward in his chair. "Can you show me?" The main screen filled with data. To most people, it would look like meaningless static, but Do-hyun saw what Yi-jin meant. There was a pattern, subtle, but definitely there. The distortions formed shapes that almost looked like. "They're like footprints," Tadwan said suddenly. "Look at how they spread out from a central point. Whatever the Nexians are using, it leaves traces in space-time itself. Traces that only our outdated sensors can detect." The implications hit Do-hyun like a physical force. Modern ships, with their advanced filters and automated systems, would never see these patterns. But the Firefly, with its old-fashioned technology and primitive sensors, could see what the rest of the fleet was blind to. How many colony worlds lie along the pattern? Do-hyun asked. Hanul worked quickly at his console. 7 more systems, sir. Based on the progression, the Nexians will hit New Eden next. Population 2 million. Do-hyun stood up, his decision made. Send a message to Fleet Command. Tell them we've detected a pattern in the Nexian attacks and request permission to investigate. Sir, Hanul said carefully, Command might not take us seriously. Where? Well, the fleet's weakest ship. Do-hyun finished with a slight smile. Maybe. But right now, we're the only ship that can see what's really happening. Sometimes the oldest tools are the best ones for the job. The response from Fleet Command came quickly. Permission granted. All other ships are engaged in defensive operations. You're the only vessel we can spare for investigation. Do-hyun looked at his crew. They were young, serving on an old ship that nobody else wanted, but they had just discovered something the entire fleet had missed. Maybe, just maybe, that would be enough to make a difference. Plot a course for New Eden, he ordered. Maximum speed. The Firefly's engines hummed to life. An older, deeper sound than modern ships, but strong and steady. As they accelerated into warp speed, Do-hyun watched his crew work. Yi-jin was totally focused on her sensors, recording every detail of the space-time distortions. Taiwan had rushed back to engineering, probably already thinking of ways to use their old warp drive to track the distortions better. Hanul managed both tactical and communications with practiced ease. They were headed toward danger in an outdated ship, but Do-hyun felt strangely confident. The Firefly might be old, might be considered weak, but it had something special. It could see things others couldn't, do things others had forgotten how to do. As they traveled through warp space, Do-hyun studied the data from the lost colonies again. The pattern of destruction was methodical, almost mathematical. The Nexians weren't just attacking randomly. They were following some kind of plan. But what were they really doing? Why did their attacks leave ripples in space-time? Captain, Yi-jin called out, her voice tense. The distortions we're tracking. They're not just traces. I think they're cracks. Cracks in what? In reality itself. The Nexians aren't just traveling through space. They're breaking it. And each attack makes the cracks bigger. The implications were terrifying. If the Nexians were actually damaging the fabric of space-time, they weren't just a military threat. They were putting the entire universe at risk. How long until we reach New Eden? Do-hyun asked. 6 hours, sir, Hanul replied. We'll be cutting it close based on the pattern. Do-hyun nodded. Then we have 6 hours to figure out what we're going to do when we get there. Officer Choi, Engineer Lee. I want theories, ideas, anything that might help us understand what we're dealing with. Lieutenant Kim, send everything we've learned to Fleet Command. Maybe someone else can see something we're missing. As his crew worked, Do-hyun watched the stars streak by through the main viewport. The Firefly might be the fleet's weakest ship, but right now it was humanity's best hope. Sometimes the most important discoveries came from the most unexpected places, and sometimes, just sometimes, being underestimated was the greatest advantage of all. In the engine room, Taiwan was making an interesting discovery of his own. The Firefly's old warp drive used principles that modern ships had abandoned for being inefficient. But as he studied the space-time distortions through the ship's sensors, he realized something crucial. The old drive's inefficient operation actually resonated with the distortions in a way that modern engines couldn't. He rushed to share his findings with Yi-jin, and together they began to see possibilities that nobody had considered before. The Firefly wasn't just detecting the Nexians' activities. It might be able to interact with them in ways that no other ship could. As the hours passed, Do-hyun felt the tension on the bridge rise. They were heading toward a confrontation with an enemy that had so far proved unstoppable, armed with nothing but theories, and an old ship that nobody else wanted. But sometimes that was exactly what you needed to change everything. The Firefly continued through space, its old engines humming their steady song, carrying its crew toward either disaster or discovery. Only time would tell which it would be, but one thing was certain. They were about to learn exactly what their weak ship could really do. The Firefly dropped out of warp space near New Eden Colony. The blue-green planet hung in space like a jewel, its cities visible as tiny spots of light on the night side. Captain Do-hyun Park felt his heart beat faster. 2 million people lived down there, unaware of the danger heading their way. "Status report," he ordered, looking at his crew. "No signs of Nexian ships yet," Lieutenant Hae-Nul Kim said from his station. "But our window is closing. Based on the pattern, they should arrive within the next hour." Science Officer Yi-Jin Choi worked quickly at her console, her fingers dancing over the controls. "Captain, the space-time distortions are already starting. They're very faint, but our old sensors can pick them up. The cracks are forming." Engineer Ta-Wan Lee's voice came over the intercom from engineering. "Sir, I've modified our warp drive to resonate with the distortions. We should be able to detect any changes instantly." Do-hyun nodded, proud of how his crew had adapted to their unusual situation. "Send a warning to the colony. Tell them to begin evacuation procedures, just in case, and get me fleet command." The main screen flickered to life, showing Admiral Song's stern face. The older man looked tired. The war against the Nexians wasn't going well. "Captain Park," the Admiral said, "please tell me you have something useful." "Sir, we've confirmed our theory. The Nexians are creating cracks in space-time before each attack. Our old sensors can detect them, and Engineer Lee has found a way to track them using our warp drive." The Admiral leaned forward. "Explain." "Modern ships filter out these readings as background noise, but the Firefly's older technology lets us see what's really happening. The Nexians aren't just traveling through space, they're breaking it. Each attack makes the damage worse. Can you stop them?" Do-hyun hesitated. "We have a theory, sir. Our old warp drive operates on principles that newer ships abandoned. It resonates with the space-time distortions. We might be able to use that to our advantage." Suddenly, Yi-Jin called out, "Captain, major distortion forming, 3 light minutes from our position." The Admiral's face showed concern. "We can't get reinforcements to you in time, Captain. You're on your own." "Understood, sir. Firefly out." Do-hyun turned to his crew. "Battle stations. Let's see what this old ship can really do." The bridge lights dimmed to combat settings as everyone prepared for action. Through the main viewport, space itself seemed to twist and bend. A massive Nexian warship appeared, its dark hull absorbing light rather than reflecting it. "It's huge," Hae-Nul whispered. The enemy ship was at least 20 times larger than the Firefly. "Size isn't everything," Do-hyun said firmly. "Officer Choi, are you recording the distortions?" "Yes, sir. The patterns are much clearer now. The Nexians are using some kind of field that bends space-time around their ship. That's why our weapons can't hit them. By the time our shots reach their position, they've literally moved space itself." Taiwan's voice came over the intercom again, excited despite the danger. "Captain, our warp drive is picking up the resonance patterns. The Nexian's field has a rhythm to it, like a heartbeat. If we time it right, we might be able to match their frequency." Yi-Jin finished, understanding dawning on her face. "Sir, if we can sync our warp field with their space-time distortions, we could see exactly where they're going to be," Do-hyun realized. "Hae-Nul, prepare for evasive maneuvers. Ta-Wan, I need full power to the warp drive. Yi-Jin, guide us through their pattern." The Nexian ship moved toward them, its weapons charging. The Firefly must have seemed like an easy target, an outdated scout ship facing one of their most powerful warships. That was their first mistake. Enemy weapons firing. He Newell reported. Pattern detected. Yi Jin called out, sending coordinates to tactical. Du Hyun gripped his chair as the Firefly moved. Their old engines roared as they matched the Nexian ship's space-time distortions. The enemy's energy beams passed through empty space where they had been moments before. It's working. Taiwan shouted from engineering. Our warp field is synchronizing with their distortions. We can see exactly how they're bending space. The Firefly danced through space, avoiding every shot the massive warship fired. Their small size and old technology had become advantages. They could match the Nexians' movements perfectly, while using less energy to bend space around their smaller hull. But they couldn't keep dodging forever. They needed a way to fight back. Yi Jin, Du Hyun called out, what happens if we reverse our warp field while synchronized with their distortions? The science officer's eyes widened. In theory, we could create a feedback loop in their space-time field. But sir, that much energy could tear apart the fabric of space itself. Taiwan finished. Or it could disrupt their ability to bend space-time. Du Hyun said. Hey Newell, get us in close. Taiwan, prepare to reverse the warp field on my mark. The Firefly turned sharply, diving toward the massive Nexian ship. Energy beams filled space around them, but none could touch them. Their old sensors and engines worked in perfect harmony, letting them see and match every distortion the enemy created. In range, He Newell reported. Warp field ready to reverse, Taiwan said. Do Hyun took a deep breath. Now, the Firefly's engines screamed as they reversed power. Their warp field, perfectly synchronized with the Nexian ship's space-time distortions, suddenly pushed in the opposite direction. The effect was immediate and spectacular. Space itself seemed to ripple around the Nexian warship. Their careful manipulation of space-time collapsed as the Firefly's reversed field created chaos in their carefully controlled patterns. The massive ship's movements became erratic, its weapons firing randomly into space. Their field is collapsing, Yi Jin reported, excitement in her voice. They've lost control of their space-time manipulation. The Nexian ship tried to retreat, but without their space-bending technology, they were just a large, slow target. Their weapons, designed to work with their space-time distortions, fired uselessly into empty space. Send a message to Fleet Command, Du Hyun ordered. Tell them we found a way to disrupt Nexian technology, and get me a channel to that ship. The main screen flickered, showing a dark bridge filled with alien forms. The Nexian commander, a tall figure wrapped in shifting shadows, spoke in a translated voice filled with disbelief. How? Your ship is primitive, weak. It should not be possible. Do Hyun smiled. Sometimes the old ways are the best ways. Your technology relies on bending space-time, but you forgot something important, the fundamental laws of physics that you're breaking. Our primitive ship remembers those laws, and now we know how to use them against you. The Nexian commander's form rippled with what might have been anger or fear. Without another word, the massive ship turned and fled, its movements now limited to normal space. As soon as they were gone, the bridge crew of the Firefly burst into cheers. They had done it. The fleet's weakest ship had found a way to fight the unstoppable enemy. Message from Fleet Command, He Newell reported, grinning. They're ordering all ships to be refit with outdated sensor arrays and warp drives. Every engineer in the fleet is being sent copies of the Firefly's technical specifications. Do Hyun looked at his crew with pride. Send them everything we've learned, and tell them we'll keep watching the patterns. The Nexians will try to adapt, to find new ways to bend space-time. But now we know their secret, and we know something they don't. What's that, sir? Yi Jin asked. Sometimes the best way to move forward is to remember what we learned in the past. Du Hyun settled back in his chair, patting the old armrest affectionately. Set course for the next colony world. The Nexians are still out there, and now we know how to fight them. The Firefly's engines hummed to life, steady and strong. They had won their first battle, But the war was far from over. Still, they had hope now. The fleet's weakest ship had proved that humanity's greatest strength wasn't in having the newest technology. It was in understanding the basic principles that made the universe work. As they entered warp speed, Do-hyun knew that everything had changed. The Nexians weren't invincible anymore. And it had taken an old, unwanted ship to show everyone why. 3 days after their victory at New Eden, the crew of the Firefly gathered in the ship's small conference room. The walls were covered with displays showing complex patterns of space-time distortions. Captain Do-hyun Park watched as Science Officer Yi-jin Choi explained their latest findings to Admiral Song and the Fleet Command staff through a secure channel. The Nexians aren't just bending space, Yi-jin said, pointing to the patterns. They're breaking it permanently. Each crack they make spreads like a spider web. If they continue, entire sections of our galaxy could become unstable. Engineer Ta-Won Lee stepped forward, adding to the explanation. Our old warp drive helped us see the problem, but it's showing us something else too. These cracks aren't random. They follow the same patterns that our drive uses to move through space, just much stronger. Admiral Song's hologram looked troubled. Are you saying the Nexians based their technology on old human warp drives? No, sir, Do-hyun answered. We think we accidentally copied their technology, but in a much safer way. Our old drives work on the same idea, but they're gentle. They bend space just enough to move through it. The Nexians crack it wide open. Lieutenant Hae-Nul Kim brought up a new display showing the galaxy. Red lines mark the spread of space-time damage. At their current rate, the cracks will reach Earth in 2 weeks. When they do, the damage might be too great to repair. The Admiral's face grew serious. What are our options? Tai-won and Yi-jin shared a look before Yi-jin spoke. We have a theory. The Firefly's warp drive doesn't just detect the cracks, it can heal them. When we reverse our field, it's like sewing up a tear in fabric. But we can only fix small areas. We need something bigger. Much bigger, Tai-won added. We need to create a massive repair field. But to do that, we'd need more power than the entire human fleet combined. Do-hyun stepped forward. Sir, we might have found a way. The Nexians are powerful because they store energy in the cracks they make. If we could tap into that energy. You want to use their own weapon against them, the Admiral said slowly. Yes, sir, but it's risky. If we make a mistake, we could make the damage much worse. The Admiral was quiet for a long moment. Finally, he said, the Nexians have begun a major offensive. They're heading for Earth with their entire fleet. We estimate 500 ships, all larger than anything we have. If your plan fails, Earth falls anyway. You have my permission. What do you need? Do-hyun looked at his crew. They were tired from days of constant work, but their eyes showed determination. Just what we have, sir. The Firefly might be old, but she's exactly what we need right now. After the meeting ended, the crew stayed to plan their next move. Yi-jin brought up a detailed scan of the nearest crack in space-time. It's like a battery, she explained. The Nexians pump energy into these cracks to power their ships. But the energy wants to escape. If we can make the right kind of field with our warp drive, we can drain that energy, Tai-won finished. Use it to power a repair field big enough to fix all the damage they caused. But the calculations have to be perfect. One mistake, and we could tear reality apart completely. Hae-Nul studied the displays. The Nexians will try to stop us. They need that energy to power their fleet. Do-hyun nodded. Then we'll have to be faster than them. How long to prepare the drive modifications? 12 hours, Tai-won said. Maybe less if everything goes right. Make it 10. The Nexians are moving faster than we expected. Yi-jin, I need you to calculate exactly where we need to be to tap into their energy storage. Hae-Nul, plot us a course that keeps us away from the main fleet until we're ready. As his crew rushed to their tasks, Do-hyun stayed in the conference room, studying the displays. The patterns of cracks were beautiful in a strange way, like shattered glass catching light, but each one represented a wound in the fabric of space itself. Hours passed as they prepared. Taiwan worked non-stop in engineering, modifying their warp drive to handle the enormous energy they planned to capture. Yi Jin's calculations filled screen after screen as she worked out the precise position they would need. He Newell plotted and replotted their course, looking for the safest path through space that was becoming increasingly unstable. Finally, everything was ready. The crew gathered on the bridge, each at their station. The main screen showed their target, a massive convergence of space-time cracks that the Nexians used as their main energy storage. All systems ready, Todd 1 reported from engineering. The warp drive modifications are holding steady. Course plotted to the convergence point. Hey Newell added, "We'll have to pass close to 3 Nexian patrol ships, but I think we can avoid them." Yi Jin checked her calculations one last time. The energy tap is prepared. If this works, we should be able to capture enough power to create a repair field covering the entire damaged sector. Do Hyun looked at each member of his crew. They had come so far from being the unwanted ship with outdated technology. Now they were humanity's best hope for survival. "Remember," he said quietly, "no matter what happens, we've already proven something important. Sometimes the old ways are the best ways. Sometimes what others see as weakness is actually strength. Let's show the universe what this old ship can really do." The Firefly's engines hummed to life, their familiar sound filling the ship. As they moved toward their target, Do Hyun thought about how strange it was that humanity's fate now rested on their oldest, weakest ship. But maybe that was exactly why they had a chance to succeed. They had learned to see things differently, to understand that progress wasn't always about having the newest technology. Sometimes it was about remembering what came before, about understanding the basic principles that made everything work. As they approached the convergence point, Nexian ships appeared on their sensors. The massive warships moved to intercept them, but they were too late. The Firefly had already begun its most important mission, not to fight, but to heal the wounds in space itself. The true test was about to begin, and the universe would never be the same afterward. The Firefly raced through space toward the convergence point of the Nexian energy storage system. Behind them, 3 massive Nexian warships gave chase. Ahead lay their target, a massive cluster of space-time cracks that glowed with stored energy. Captain Do Hyun Park watched the main screen intently. Time to intercept. 4 minutes, Lieutenant Hae-Nul Kim reported from his station. "The Nexian ships are gaining, but they'll be too late if we maintain this speed." In engineering, Engineer Taiwan Lee worked frantically to keep their modified warp drive stable. The old engine was being pushed far beyond its designed limits, but somehow it kept running. "Drive holding steady, Captain. She's giving everything she's got." Science Officer Yi Jin Shoi's hands moved quickly over her console as she monitored the approaching energy convergence. "The cracks are even larger than we thought. The amount of energy stored there, it's incredible. If we can tap into it correctly, we'll have more than enough power to repair all the damage." Do Hyun nodded, his expression serious. "And if we make a mistake, then we tear reality apart completely," Yi Jin said quietly. "But we won't make a mistake. The math is solid. The theory is sound. We can do this." The ship shuddered as a Nexian energy beam passed close by. The massive warships were getting desperate, firing even though they were still out of effective range. "They know what we're trying to do," Hae-Nul said. "They're throwing everything they have at us." "Of course they are," Do Hyun replied. "We're about to take away their power source." Yi Jin, start the energy tap sequence. Todd 1, prepare the warp drive for power absorption. Hae-Nul, get us as close to the convergence point as you can. The Firefly dove toward the glowing cluster of cracks in space-time. Up close, they could see the true scale of what the Nexians had created. Countless fractures in reality itself, each one storing enormous amounts of energy. The sight was both beautiful and terrifying. Beginning energy tap, Yi Jin announced, reversing warp field polarity. Now, the ship's engines changed tone, their steady hum becoming a deep resonance that seemed to vibrate through reality itself. The Firefly's old warp drive, modified far beyond its original design, began to draw energy from the cracks. Power levels rising, Taiwan reported. 10%, 20, 30. The drive is holding. On the main screen, they could see the energy flowing into their ship. The Firefly's outdated systems, which had once been considered a weakness, were now their greatest strength. The old warp drive understood the basic principles of space-time in a way that modern ships had forgotten. Nexian ships entering weapons range, Haenul warned. They're charging their main weapons. Let them come, Du-hyun said calmly. We're already past the point where they can stop us. Yi Jin, how much power do we have? 60%, 70, 80. She paused, checking her readings. Sir, we're about to hit maximum safe capacity. Do-hyun leaned forward in his chair. Push past it. The Firefly can handle it. She's tougher than anyone ever gave her credit for. The ship groaned as more energy poured into its systems. Warning lights flashed across every console, but nothing failed. The old ship, built in a time when durability mattered more than efficiency, took everything they demanded of it. Power levels at 120%. Ta-1 called out. The drive is still stable. We're actually doing it. Suddenly, a new voice filled the bridge. The Nexian commander they had faced before. Stop this madness. You cannot control such power. Your primitive ship will tear itself apart. Do-hyun smiled. That's where you're wrong. Our ship isn't primitive. It's fundamental. We understand the basic laws of physics that you've forgotten in your rush for power. And now we're going to use that understanding to fix what you broke. He turned to his crew. Begin the repair sequence. Show them what the fleet's weakest ship can really do. Yi Jin and Taiwan worked in perfect synchronization, directing the enormous energy they had captured. The Firefly's warp drive began to pulse, sending out waves of carefully controlled power. Where the waves touched the cracks in space-time, something amazing happened. The fractures began to heal. Reality itself seemed to knit back together, the damage caused by the Nexians' reckless technology slowly reversing. It's working, Yi Jin exclaimed. The repair field is stable. The cracks are closing. The Nexian ships stopped firing, their crews watching in disbelief as their power source was not just drained, but erased. The massive warships began to lose power, their space-bending technology failing as the energy they depended on disappeared. Send a message to Fleet Command, Du-hyun ordered. Tell them to begin the operation. All ships equipped with old-style warp drives should start their repair sequences now. Across the sector, human ships that had been retrofitted with outdated technology began to pulse with energy. Each one generated its own repair field, adding to the effect the Firefly had started. The cracks in space-time began to close faster and faster. The Nexian commander's voice came again, but this time it held a note of fear. What have you done? Our power, our superiority. We've reminded the universe of something important, Du-hyun replied. True progress isn't about having the most advanced technology. It's about understanding the foundations that make everything work. You tried to break reality itself for power. We remembered how reality is supposed to work, and that gave us the power to stop you. The repair field continued to spread, closing cracks and healing damage. The Nexian ships, now powerless, began to retreat. Their mighty fleet, which had seemed unstoppable just days before, was now just a collection of very large, very ordinary ships. On the Firefly's bridge, the crew watched as their sensors showed the space-time distortions disappearing one by one. Their old ship, once considered too weak to be useful, had just changed the course of the war. Message from Admiral Song, Haenul reported. The repair operation is working across all sectors. The Nexian fleet is in full retreat. They're saying. He paused, grinning. "They're saying the fleet's weakest ship just saved the galaxy." Do-hyun looked at his crew, Yi-jin, who had seen the patterns everyone else missed. Ta-won, who had pushed their old engines to do the impossible. Henul, who had flung them through everything the enemy had thrown at them. They were young, serving on an old ship that nobody else had wanted, but they had done something extraordinary. "No," he said quietly. "We didn't save the galaxy because we were weak. We saved it because we understood something important. Sometimes the old ways are the best ways. Sometimes what others see as outdated is actually exactly what you need." The Firefly wasn't the fleet's weakest ship. She was the only ship that could do what needed to be done. As the last of the space-time cracks healed, the Firefly's engines returned to their normal, steady hum. They had done it. They had faced an enemy that broke the laws of physics, and they had won by remembering how those laws were supposed to work. The universe was safer now, thanks to an old ship and a young crew who had proved that true strength comes not from having the most advanced technology, but from understanding the basic principles that make everything work. The Firefly turned toward home, its mission accomplished. They had not just saved humanity. They had reminded everyone of something that should never have been forgotten. Sometimes the best way to move forward is to remember what came before.